Good afternoon. Welcome to Hyderabad Literary Festival. Cinema has often moved forward because of filmmakers who chose to work against convention. Today's panel, Maverick Movie Makers, brings together voices whose work spans independent filmmaking, film history, and cultural commentary. It's my pleasure to introduce Onir, also known as Anirban Dhar, filmmaker, producer, screenwriter, and editor. His film, My Brother Nikhil, was among the earliest Indian films to address AIDS and same-sex relationships. His film, I Am, won Best Film at the National Film Awards. His latest film, We Are Fahim and Karun, is a Kashmiri language queer film shot entirely in Kashmir, which was incidentally shown just before this. I hope some of you have attended it. He is also the recipient of the Rainbow Warrior Award for Pine Cone and the author of the biography, I Am Onir and I Am Gay. Also with us is Shamya Dasgupta, sports journalist and deputy editor at ESPN Crick Info and a writer on cinema and culture. His books include Don't Disturb the Dead, Bhivani Junction, and Cricket Changed My Life. He has translated Mahashweta Devi's work into English, and his latest book, Unmechanical, Ritvik Ghat in 50 Fragments, brings together essays celebrating Ghatak on his centenary. Moderating the conversation is Nikhila S, professor in the Department of Film Studies at the EFL University, Hyderabad, whose work spans film studies and gender studies, and who has been teaching and researching cinema for over 3 decades. Over to you, Nikhila.
Thank you all very much. Thank you HLF organizers for asking me to be a part of this session with 2 wonderful one filmmaker and another associated closely with cinema, particularly through this book, Unmechanical, Ritvik Ghatak in 50 Fragments. When I was asked by the organizers to be part of this session and sent this book, I think the first thing that came to me is, oh, there's one more book now in the centenary year on Ghatak. But when I began reading it, Shamya, you'll be surprised to know that there are some things that really caught my eye. Of course, there is a lot for someone who wants to know about Ghatak, the persona, and there's lots to know about Ghatak as the filmmaker. But what I really enjoyed reading, Shamya, was the perspectives from outside of the Bengali context. For one, Ghatak has been translated to non-Bengalis by a whole host of critics and film scholars. But there's also a view of Ghatak from outside in this book, which I enjoyed very much. C.S. Venkateshwar and a whole lot of others as well who are responding to Ghatak. So I was just wondering, as the editor of this volume, what really informed your choice of putting together this very fine set of write-ups on Ghatak? What really were you looking at, when you decided to put this volume together?
Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks for the kind words, and hello, everyone. Very simply, that I wanted to do a book on Ritvik Ghatak that was not for Kolkata. There are lots of books on Ghatak in Kolkata, and I'd love for people there to read it as well, of course. But there are lots of books. So if you're interested in Ghatak, there's been many ways to know him over the last 50, 60, 70 years. Um, Two things here. One, I believe, and that's kind of informed by the conversations I've had for this book, the research I've done, is that he was much more admired and revered even outside Bengal than he was in Bengal, at the time and even after. And I don't want to step into your other questions you might have, but the impact on filmmakers outside Bengal has been a lot more. His greatest days were perhaps as a teacher at FTII and not as a filmmaker, because he was really not very watched. So people like Umar Shahani and Manikal, who are very synonymous with Ghatak, John Abraham, Saeed Mirza, various others, he had a school of sorts outside Bengal and not so much in Bengal. And so combining the two things, the fact that there's a lot about him in Bengali and the fact that there must be an audience for him outside Bengal that has not been explored, I wanted to sort of introduce Ghatak to that audience, because there are books in English on Ghatak as well, but mostly these are very academic works, scholarly works that are not, there's not mass things, and they don't even reach the bookstores at times. You know how it is with certain academic works. So that was the intention, and as you correctly mentioned, as I was speaking to these people, everyone wanted to write, and everyone had things to say. There are many others who also wanted to write, had things to say, which might have repeated things that are already here, and maybe people I didn't reach out to just because I didn't know I had to reach out to them, and so on and so forth. But that's basically the idea of choosing the people, and the intention being to take him outside Bengal.
Onir, I was just wondering, about the kind of choices, as filmmakers, one makes, coming from certain kinds of places, social subjectivities, and so on. This is also something that, came after reading this book on Ghatak. Because so much of Ghatak's persona is intertwined with his films. So I was just wondering, how much as a filmmaker would you like your audience to know about you, or would you like to say, well, my film is all and you don't need to know anything about me? Or is there is there a sense that you want to put yourself along with your films so that you are read through the lens of who you are as a filmmaker? I was just wondering how you would respond to this.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here. So, growing up in Kolkata during college time, huge fan of Hrithik Ghatak. Some of his films have really, really inspired as a budding filmmaker. Then, for me, I think I'm born and brought up in Bhutan, and during my entire childhood, I didn't know the word gay. I didn't see myself in my cinema, in books that I read, in advertisement or conversation. It's only when I came to Kolkata and I was studying in Jadavpur University Comparative Literature that for the first time there were discussions without looking down about queerness when we were discussing Greek literature, ancient Indian literature. And at that point, I saw this film by Hanif Qureshi called My Beautiful Laundry. And it was in 1987. He had come to Jadavpur University with a film. And suddenly I felt that is me. I've not seen this ever before because I was always invisible everywhere. And I think somewhere, because right from when I was in class 8, I wanted to be a filmmaker. I think subconsciously it was important for me that I want to be seen. I, as in also the queer community, And for me, be it my brother Nikhil or we are Faiman Karun, is an act of invisibility in a society that largely does not still want to, see you in your completeness. And I think a lot of me becomes a part of that film. of that journey. And to the extent that the film that I just did before, We Are Fireman Karun, is a film called Pinecone, which was kind of half semi-autobiographical, where I wanted to explore queer desire, because again, that is something that's not really seen in Indian cinema. So for me, yes, it's very, very important for myself to be a part of the, and not just when it comes to queer cinema, but also stories that I tell, marginalized people, because I feel as a minority community, you also identify, and for me, those stories are equally my stories.
Okay. For a book on, Ghatak, um, I was just thinking of what a fine balance the book has kind of walked. Because it could have become a complete hagiography, where everyone is kind of saying kind words as if to kind of alleviate the guilt of how Ghatak was treated when he was alive. So it is not a hagiography. It could have kind of whetted people's curiosity about the kind of life and all the gossip that exists about Ghatak. It does not do that. It could have become an academic book with a set of scholars writing about it. It's not that. So in a sense, there is something in it for everyone. For instance, I found Moinak Bishwas's article and Sangeeta Sen's article extremely interesting. So there was that bit as well. There are such interesting pieces by people who worked along with Ghatak. So I'm still thinking about the plan for this book. So did you think that you should have something in the book for everyone, for the academic, for the scholar, for the person who is awed by the persona of Ghatak? I mean, what went into a book like this? Because this is somewhat unusual, I would think.
Yeah, I have to be honest here, and also perhaps tell the people here about how a book like this happens. Unless, say, Onir were to do something similar, he knows everyone in the film world, or an academic were to do it. I'm neither. I'm a sports journalist. So with me, there's a lot of reaching out and failing to convince the person to write. The other thing here is that I was not in a position to pay anyone for writing, because all the money went to Ritik Ghatak's son, right? So there are handicaps, and these people don't know me, the film directors who have written, or some of the academics. Of course, I know some of them, and I know people who know some of them, and so on. But there's a lot of failure in terms of getting people to write. So that's there. So it's not perfectly planned in that sense. A perfect plan might have been different. I'm not saying it would have been better than this, but you know what I'm trying to say. The other thing is, I approached it like I would if I were to write a biography, right? So I wanted his personal life. I wanted critical essays on his work. I wanted his voice, which obviously is not possible. It's 50 years since he died. So I wanted his voice, and there's a lot of that as well. I wanted discussions on his films. If I were to write a biography myself, I would want all these things to give a complete picture about the man, or any subject that you talk about, unless it's a hagiography, which I obviously wouldn't have made it. I wanted all these aspects and angles to come into the book, and therefore you reach out. If I am to do an interview with someone on Ghatak and I reach out to an academic like, say, Moinak Bishwash, what are the questions I'll ask? And therefore his essay, after he's convinced, becomes that. People talking about the FTII years. There's a bit of repetition there because, it's a very short period and about 5-6 filmmakers talk about that. I've tried to keep them different, cull what they've said and so on. But it's kind of similar. I understand that, but that's the memory they have. And a bit of repetition, I don't think takes away too much, because these are also very big names. Adur Gopalakrishnan or Gautam Ghosh, who was not a student, and Ketan Mehta, of course, Janu Barua, various others. There's an essay by Kumar Shahani that I got permission to reprint. So very honestly, that's how it worked. Where if I were writing, these are the voices I'd want in the book, including his wife, his estranged wife, which the family doesn't really want, but it has to be there. It can't be helped that the family doesn't want it because it has to be there. So it's all of that. So like you said, it's for something for everyone, and hopefully enough for everyone. You know?
And thinking of Ghatak and thinking of the language that he made films, most of his films in, which is Bengali, and that brings me to Onir and the films that you make. So initially it looks like, Hindi cinema is the medium, or Hindi is the medium, where it looks like you want to, tell your stories. But then I was watching I Am, and then there are all these languages. There is Kannada, there is Kashmiri, there is Marathi, which I thought is so unusual. I mean, in films which have been taught to be monolingual largely, here is a filmmaker who's not just bringing other languages for the laughs, to say, here's the Madrasi, but actually to set up, to say something about the characters. So I was just wondering if you would like to reflect on the language and the choice. Why not, let's say, like Ghatak, why not make a film in Bengali? And why do you feel that you need to tell your stories in Hindi? Does that have to do with the subjects, the audience? Just your thoughts on some of this.
So after I finished my filmmaking course, initially actually I wanted to be in Kolkata and make films there. But it was very, very difficult because I was very young then and everyone used to be like this big dada and things would just not move, and that's when my sister, who is from FTI, had just come to Bombay and I shifted to Bombay, and I also realized that with the kind of stories I wanted to tell, I could reach out to a larger audience. But increasingly, I feel that India is so multilingual. We have so many various languages, and I have friends who are from different parts. And if I had to tell other stories, I mean, it would be so unreal that if I'm sitting at home and talking to my mother, I'm a Bengali, that they're speaking in Hindi, and the only Bengali terms you have is ush, or something like that happens in a Hindi film. I thought that they would speak in Bengali. So that's why first in I Am, the bit that I shot in Kolkata, the Bengali characters speak in Bengali. I recently made a film called, it's again an anthology, which is called My Melbourne, which was shot in Melbourne. And my character, one of the characters was a Bangladeshi. So a lot of that film is in Bangla and English. And then when I did We Are Fahim and Karun, it was a story which is set in Kashmir. A lot of the characters are Kashmiri, and I thought that it's so unnatural that they would be talking in Hindi at home and all. So I wanted, and somehow I didn't think so much of the commercial aspect, but I thought that it would be so much more natural for them to speak the language which belongs to them and to try and tell that story in that language. And that's how, and I feel that I would rather now identify myself as an Indian filmmaker than Bollywood or just Hindi.
I think at this point in time, that's such an important statement coming from a filmmaker of your stature, because, largely because as an academic, I feel Hindi cinema has kind of dominated discussions for far too long in the academia. Coming to, again, the question of language with respect to Ghatak, is it, looking back in retrospect, did the kind of stories that Ghatak wanted to say about partition, do you think that he was making these films in Bengali partly because of the subject, that is, it was about partition, and therefore these stories could be told only in Bangla? So for someone, let's say, down here in South India, I came to Ghatak pretty late. So, and I did take the film, FTII route or any such thing. So, is Ghatak, I mean, it's a name that one always knew and heard, but cinema of Ghatak that one came to enjoy, that happened pretty late. So, do you feel that language, the Bengali, and the fact that somebody like Satyajit Ray, I don't know why, maybe traveled more easily than Ghatak did. So I was just wondering what your reflections are about that aspect.
It's a very valid question, but there's quite a few answers, not just one answer. See, the Ray versus Ghatak sort of thing is a very old thing in Bengal. I don't know if there are any or many Bengalis here or how many people are familiar with Ghatak's work. But Ray was like Onir said, he wants to be an Indian filmmaker. Ray was a global filmmaker. You know, he was everywhere. He was making films, as I've recently discovered in Soumitra Chatterjee's biography that's come out, that his movies were made to time with he had to get it ready in time for the festivals, you know, because he had a huge audience across the world, reflected later in the awards he got. So the question you asked, firstly, he made one film in Hindi Urdu, Shatranj Ke Khiladi, and Sadgati as well. But his films traveled across India despite being entirely Bengali. In Ghatak's case, what I feel is that, yes, partition is one part of it, but what Ghatak said, and I actually would love to ask Onir this as well, what Ghatak said to his students again and again is make films about the subjects you know about the milieu you know about. And that comes across in what he said about his work. About the milieu you know about, and therefore, you'll always be in control of your subject. You know that subject, you know that milieu, you know how they talk, how they walk, what they eat, etc., etc. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that's what he said. And therefore, his cinema was about the refugee, primarily, he made other things also, of course, but the refugee who came from that side to this side. A criticism of him is that he didn't make films about Muslims. There were Muslim characters, but the Muslims went there. His milieu was here. Therefore, you know, but that's one part of it. And I find it very fascinating. People say this, that he's more popular in Kerala than in Bengal, you know, Ghatak. And I find it very interesting because the South, and other parts of India as well, but especially the South, didn't feel partition, right? It was the partition of two states of India, one to the east, one to the northwest. But he has a pretty big fan following, especially in Kerala, but also in the South. If you read Jayant Kaikini's piece and his poem, he was telling me he doesn't even speak English much. You know, he's a Kannada, right? Kannadiga, and writes in Kannada. Huge fan of Ghatak. His son is called Ritik as a result. You know, so he came here. His work came here, though he never did. His subjects never did. The problem about work, see, so that answers working in Bangla. His second film was made in Jharkhand, Ajantrik, which is now Jharkhand, that time Bihar. The other thing is Ghatak worked with, I call him India's first independent filmmaker, which is a term now, because he worked with the smallest of budgets, except one film, Tita Shakti Nodinam, which was made in Bangladesh. And his films have the worst prints and subtitles ever. You know, even Ray's films are sometimes poorly subtitled, but his were atrocious. You can't understand anything about the film and blurry images, etc., etc. So here's a person, because of his own problems, perhaps not always in the best of health, making films with small budgets, without great technical help. But he's a master technician, as Onir is better placed to tell you about that than I am. He's a master craftsman. He's a master technician. And which is perhaps being discovered and celebrated a lot more now than was the case earlier. But these are perhaps the reasons he either worked where he did or was forced to work where he did and the way he did. But he did write the scripts of at least one huge Hindi film, right? Madhumati, Bimal Roy's. His daughter told me recently that it's still his biggest hit. And Madhumati. And Musafir, which was Rishikesh Mukherjee's first film. Uh, I don't know if it was a hit, I don't think it was. But it had Dilip Kumar and Kishore Kumar and various big stars. But these two films were made in Bombay when he was working for Filmistan Studios. He couldn't take it, he couldn't take that world.
I can use this as a cue to ask you the next question about stardom, and is it a paraphernalia that is at all part of the kind of films that you want to make? Also, I have a somewhat trivial question as well to ask. I think in a couple of films, you name the characters, I mean, the names get repeated. Nikhil Kapoor, Anamika. So I was just wondering, is this some kind of a Freudian repetition? Or where does this come from? And also something like I am and we are, So I was just wondering, are you saying something more through these repetitions, and do these stars matter at all in your scheme of things?
So first of all, just responding to what he was talking about, I feel that the sense of being comfortable with your story, it's so important. There was this film that I produced, which I didn't direct, called Chauranga, which was set in Jharkhand, and it was a story of a Dalit. And when I read the script, it was by someone called Bikash Mishra, who comes from the space. And I really loved the story. And it would be his first film as a debut filmmaker. And a lot of people asked me, why didn't you direct it? And I kept telling, I can understand the story, cherish the story, but I can never tell that story because I've not lived that life, and sometimes, like, I didn't do Vian, Fahim and Karun 10 years or 20 years ago because I did it after traveling to Kashmir for 20 years, learning the language, living with the people there, and where I don't feel the other, So I feel it's so important to, and I remember, like, with Ritik Ghatak especially, like my father, who is a refugee from Bangladesh, I mean, how much that film would mean to him, And I feel also a lot of, viewership for a film like Ghatak's or Ray's are not confined to that time because now, at that time also, the culture of subtitles was not really there. Now people are watching films with subtitles and rediscovering. And I think Kerala, because Kerala always had this incredible film society movement. And the way, I remember, like, when I was showing my film I Am in Kerala, I was very scared, that how would the audience react. And then to go to the theater, which are single screen theaters, where people are sitting on the stairs, banging at the door, right from the auto rickshaw driver to everybody. So I think it's it's only natural that they cherish and celebrate Ritik Ghatak. And I forgot what was your question. Sorry. Yes, the stars. I think one is in terms of, like, because I've always done independent films, and for me, it was never possible to have paid Juhi Chawla the kind of money that she would, So I remember when I went to narrate My Brother Nikhil. So usually in Bollywood, the way people narrate is 2 hours of narration. They're like, aisa chala, aisa more. I mean, very dramatic. And I'm not used to that, So I went there and she had kept 2 hours for me. And I finished telling her the story in 10 minutes, And I told her, okay, this is the script, please read it, And I remember her calling after 3 days and telling that if I had gone by your narration, I wouldn't have done the film. I read the script. I love it. I'm doing it. I know you don't have the money. Just pay my spot boy. And so I've been lucky enough to be constantly working with actors who want to do the film because of what their role is. During I Am, which is again unheard of. Manisha Koirala and Juhi Chawla would share one makeup person. One would wake up early one day and the other. So I've been very, very fortunate. But I think it is when you stop looking at them as stars and just treat them as your colleague and that you're making the film together that happens. So it's important because for me, I think my brother Nikhil could reach out to so many people because there was a Juhi Chawla in it. It did matter. It's much more difficult. Now I feel that, okay, I've been working for so long, so I increasingly work with newcomers because I feel I can do that. But it's much more easier if I would choose to work with known actors. In terms of names, Nikhil was very funny. I had seen this film by Prakash Jha called Hip Hip Hooray, where the main character was Nikhil, and I had just fallen in love with him. So I decided
This was
to.
Rajkiran, was it?
Sorry?
Rajkiran.
No, not Rajkiran. It was, I forgot the actor's name. So that's how and then I wanted to repeat. I have this, connect with the same actors having the same name till a certain point when Sanjay said, he's also my co-producer, said, enough of this. I'm not going to be named Nikhil in the next film.
Can I just tell a small story just to add to this about stars? Of course, not the same as Juhi Chawla or Manisha Koirala, but Supriya Chaudhary acted in two of Ghatak's best films. One, his only hit, Megheta Katara, and and Komal Gandhar, which is, again, a fantastic film. For those of you who might not know, Uttam Kumar was the greatest sort of hero in Bengali cinema. I'm not saying being his wife or partner makes her anything more than she was. She was a fantastic actor on her own, did some very good mainstream films as well. Now, Supriya Chaudhary had a huge soft spot for Hrithik Ghatak, one of the very few people in Bengal who did. And, of course, Megheta Katara happened the way it should have, but by the time Komal Gandhar happened, Supriya Devi was very busy. She was shooting for 2-3 other films and didn't have time for Hrithik, who was not paying her anyway, much at least. Hrithik would hang around outside the studios or sets that she was working in, take her away in a car for an hour, shoot, put her back. Traced her to Darjeeling where she was shooting and did the same thing. Just come, do this 3 lines, go away. That, obviously well beyond schedule. And finally, when she saw the rushes or the print of Komal Gandhar, she saw herself singing a song that she hadn't shot for. It was done with a Supriya Devi wasn't a small woman, but as men go, slightly slender sort of man who was an assistant, was put in a sari, mostly shot in the dark, and this song happened. This is Jyotsna Rate Shobai Gache Bone, was shot like that. This is a person who was making fantastic films, which were not regarded as fantastic then, with a fairly big star, obviously not in a position to pay her too much money, but she wanted to do it. Same as people who love the stories or the filmmaker and want to do it no matter what. And she did. Obviously, tough, but that's how these things got done.
Body double. Maybe we have time for just one more conversation before I open it up. This has to do with this sense of place or space that a filmmaker associates with, which is so prominent with Ghatak. But I also found it very moving in the I Am sequence where you talk, which is the story of Megha, the character who, gets left behind. So much is spoken about those who move away, the trauma of those who move away, which is in fact, you could say the trauma of Ghatak. But in Megha, that really struck me, that what happens to those who get left behind and stuck. And in the film that I watched in the morning session as well, We Are Fahim, the sense of being stuck, nowhere to go. I mean, there are so few who tell stories about people who are stuck in their milieus, where there is no sense of, moving, escape, going away anywhere. So I was just wondering, when with respect to Kashmir, And everyone, talks about terrorism. But here's a very, very personal, I think, kind of impediment where characters and people feel, they're stuck with nowhere to go. And your director, I caught, their stories. So I was just wondering if you would like to reflect on that before we talk about Ghatak and his trauma of the move.
So when I first went to Kashmir, that was 2006, for researching on a story, and I was visiting Kashmiri Pandit refugee camps in Jammu, meeting Kashmiri Pandits who continued to stay in Srinagar, and also meeting the local Kashmiri Muslim population there. And what really stuck me, and one of the reasons is, I Megha was actually inspired by the story of Sanjay Suri. His father was shot dead and they migrated. But when I was making the film, I ended up speaking to a lot of women, Kashmiri Muslim women and Kashmiri Pandits. And I realized that, the way they looked at conflict was very different from the way men look at conflict, one. And also, the thing that how life changed for the women in Kashmir with the conflict, for those who left, the loss of homeland is of course, something, but the loss that you have in the way your life changes when you are there. And I thought that if we have to have a dialogue, because mostly we have monologues, when it especially comes to Kashmir, that it's so important to start having a dialogue with each other. So Megha and Rubina in the film are having a dialogue where Juhi has all are hurt, and Manisha at the end says, but mujhe is jannat mein jeene ka saza mila hai. So, which one does not talk about. And I feel that, be it we are Fahim and Karun, be it this, I wanted to address that, what about that aspect of life.
And Ghatak and, kind of the loss of homeland that so informed every one of his, each one of his work. Want to reflect on that?
Of course, the Partition trilogy is best known, and those had to do with Partition. Generally, I won't go on for too long. We need to move. But, what Onir said is so true of Ghatak's work, because his work was, yes, about partition and everything else, but it really was about forced migration and the search for a home. Of course, the partition theme sort of plays into that. But from his first film, which was made in 1952 but released after his death in 1977, which was about a family which had been evicted from its home in Kolkata, or the outskirts of Kolkata, to another part, and they have to leave that house again because no one's found a job and they can't live there. So it's home. The second film is Bari Theke Paliye, which is a young boy running away from home, going to Calcutta, kind of finding himself and going back home. It's home. It's leaving a home you have and a lot of privilege, but not really thinking it's yours, going to look for it and going back there, home again. And then it's Ojantrik, which is about, which is what the book is sort of named after. Ojantrik is about a man losing his mother, the only person he had, and the car coming into his life right about then, and then becoming his mother, beloved, provider, everything. So home, if you want to think about. And then, of course, the trilogy comes, and then Tita Shakti Nodi Nam comes, which is about a migratory sort of community that lives next to her on a riverbank. Climate change or whatever it might be changes that, they have to migrate again, but they can come back when the weather changes. It's always about home. And I think in today's world, he would have had a lot of films to make, not just in India, but across the world, everywhere. I mean, forget the world, just look at India today. His Bengal, there's SIR on right now. You have to prove your identity, you have to prove who you are, you have to claim your home, you have to reclaim your home. These are all, he's so relevant today because of that, because the world is exactly or worse than it was then.
Yeah, I think it's a very solemn reflection on, and we can open out the discussion at this point in time. Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, this question is for Onir. In the beginning, you talked about My Beautiful Laundrette and like finding out about the word gay and everything. So it has been 40 years since that film came out, and we have had like in Taiwan, like Taiwanese New Wave and everything. Wong Kar-wai even has made a gay film and stuff. But in India, we have not had that many like queer films outside of like the small film festivals like Bangalore Queer Film Festival and all. But you might know more. So in the vein of My Beautiful Laundrette, like would you have say like for the new the younger queer people like an Indian canon for like non-tragic queer films in India in the last 40 years?
So when I made my last film, which is called Pine Cone, uh, it's a queer love story which celebrates queer desire. So it's not a tragic love story. For me, even We Are Fine and Karun is a film which is about hope and love, and where also I'm quite tired and sick of uh, films being about acceptance and coming out, and I feel that okay, that's done with. And also, constantly whatever films we have, even the good ones, are from a very heteronormative gauge, and I want to see our lives beyond that. Beyond, I remember when I was screening Pinecone in Calcutta, this lady journalist comes up to me after the film and say that, I really loved the film, but don't you think there is too much of lovemaking? So I told her that you've watched a 90-minute film where there is 4 minutes of lovemaking, and you will go to a cinema, which is a film which is 2.5 hours, and watch 2 hours of violence, and you're okay with that. So is the problem you or my film? So I feel that there's a lot to do with, and I always think that all my life I've gone and watched quote unquote straight films without thinking, and though I was invisible, but I enjoyed. I never felt I was watching some alien story. But why is there so much of resistance when it comes from the heterosexual audience, straight audience, to come and watch my film as just another story? What is it that makes it, there are people who say that, oh, children shouldn't, even the censor board, and I'm like, all my life, like my childhood, I grew up without the word gay. That didn't make me straight. So why would suddenly, if children or young people are exposed to queer cinema, why will they suddenly become queer? So I feel that one is constantly battling these things, but as a queer filmmaker, I'm tired of, I don't want acceptance. It's my right, and I'm not begging for it, and I'm not begging for that look.
So all your films are UA certified.
Hello, this is for Onir. Do you ever feel that you will come out of your zone of queer filmmaking to sometimes, very straight question?
Okay, so I have a very straight answer for that. One is, it is the audience that, objectifies you, because I have done more films which are not queer narratives than queer already. Most of my work is actually not queer, one. Two, I wonder if anyone ever asks a straight filmmaker, will you go beyond your straight narrative and make a gay film? Actually, the problem is always how you release it, how you distribute it, because unfortunately, just like the audience, be it the OTT platforms, distributors, they all, unfortunately, like it took a long, long time for films which were telling stories of women to make it to the cinemas. And even now, women are still struggling because it's very misogynistic films that is being celebrated by everybody, mostly. So it's going to take much, much longer for us, because not just making the films, but to find an audience you know, just like it's taken so long for women, and we have just started the journey. It's only 2018 that we have been decriminalized, you know, and still people who are decision makers mostly are men who firstly think that, okay, we'll make a couple of women films. I don't know what is women film. It's us. And queer is like, oh my God, like we're the world's largest filmmaking country. And 10% of the population is theoretically supposed to be queer. Not even 1% of our films tell our stories. And it is also, it's because of the audience and people who make the decisions.
I was, in this context, I was just wondering if there is a question. Oh, okay. Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, hi everyone. So thank you for the wonderful discussion. My question is to Onir that uh, personally from what I've studied and what movies I've watched, most of the queer representations of cinema are also talking about elite queer people, not people at the margins. Maybe for people, somebody maybe who's queer and who's working in a corporate, for them it's okay to come out and still live a lifestyle. But somebody in a rural village or somebody who's in the margins who doesn't even have access to primary healthcare facilities. So in that kind of a setting, how are their lives not being represented in cinema even now? So they also deserve a platform for their stories to be told. So as a director who's openly gay and like you are celebrated in Bengal, I'm Bengali, so I know I've watched a few of your movies. I've grown up watching your movies along with my parents. They have introduced me to your movies. But still, a lot of modern Indian or even indie movies do not capture this aspect of queer people at the margins. So do you think you will be taking it up, or do you think it should be explored more in future?
So I think you didn't watch the film that we just screened here. So that's about a Kashmiri gay character. So I think it's the first ever film that is shot in Kashmiri language, with Kashmiri actors, which is a queer film from there, first fiction. And I'm very, very proud that earlier this month, it was the first ever queer film to be screened in Kashmir, you know. And it was like I was expecting 40 to 50 people, 120 people came, sat through the film, huge round of Q&A, and there were people who were sending me, I was in tears when I got some of the messages saying, there was this one I still remember saying that I'm 20-year-old, I'm Kashmiri, I'm queer. I didn't get to see the film, but everyone's talking about it. But thank you for existing, because I never thought that there would be a day that I would see us speaking our language being represented in cinema. So yes, it's so important to make these stories.
Yeah. I think we have had a wonderful session, and my cue is here. Ma'am has come up here to tell us that it's time.
She was dying to ask a question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
So firstly, I'm a big fan. I've only had the privilege to watch one of your movies. And I was willing to put up this question in front of you that we live in black and whites, right? One generation who understands the society and one generation who doesn't. But that's easy. There are grays who pretend that they are a part of it and they want to be supportive towards it, but internally they are not. Just because of a trend, they're being supportive, or just because of their friends being queer, they try to become a part of the society. But how do you think the cinema that queer society is making, or queer artists are making, are impacting them? And do you think that it's a problem, that grey group of people? Or do you think that it's supportive?
I think, unfortunately, the straight world is a long way off from. I remember once I was with a group of filmmakers traveling. We were in Austria. There were 10, 12 of us. And the evening, everyone was sitting together, having a glass of wine and speaking. And they all decided to talk about each one's first love. You know, someone talked about eloping, da-da-da. So it was going round the table. And they all loved me. But when it came to me, suddenly they skipped me. you know. And here I was sitting with all my friends, and I felt that they just presumed that I would be uncomfortable talking about. And in a minute, I felt like, shit, I don't belong here, you know. And I feel as a filmmaker, and that's why I keep talking about invisibility and visibility, it's important through my films to be visible for the community. And like, for example, when I was doing We Are Fine and Karun, just like I told you about this Kashmiri Muslim boy, it's a love story between someone who is in the forces and a local. So even in the Indian Army, being queer is not accepted, you know. And when I was making this film, I had messages from army men from across India saying, thank you for speaking up for us. You know, so I feel, yes, it does so, because when people come, and there were, like when I had a screening in Delhi, there were people from the army. I invite everybody. They came and they said that, oh, after watching this film, you know, it gives us a different perspective, not only looking at queerness, but also how Kashmiris are represented. So there's a lot of cross-section, you know, in the film.
Would you like to have a last word? Okay. Okay. Thank you all very much. First of all, I have to thank Onir and Shamya for a wonderful discussion, a wide range of issues from their own work to larger issues relating to art and artists. Thanks to the audience for the patient
wonderful
hearing.
questions.
Yeah.
Very engaged.
Yeah, very, very relevant questions.
Shamya sir, I have heard about Ritwik Ghatak a lot of I've heard about him. Never got to see any of his movies. So, but thanks to you, I'll buy your book and I'll see all his movies. Thank you so much.
Quickly, his films are being restored and subtitled by various people, including Criterion and the British Film Institute and our own National Film Archives of India.
Okay.
There are only 8 films. Sooner or later, they'll all become available.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
On that note, thank you so much for such a invigorating and insightful conversation. Shamya, Onir, and Nikhila for the wonderful moderation. Thank you, audience. And Shamya's book is available at the Book Point. You can grab a copy and get it autographed by him. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.